I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Snow, I'd like to start with you at NCMEC. How many kids are missing, roughly? Do we know?
I can speak to the number of missing child reports that NCMEC receives.
Okay.
So last year we received over 29,000 reports.
Just in 1 year?
In 1 year.
And what's the total? I mean,
That's reported
Correct.
missing. So within NCIC, so the database where law enforcement is reporting children missing, there are around roughly around 500,000 children.
and then what percentage of those do you have in your data are repeat offenders, like for a lot of these children?
Yeah, we do see situations, especially children that are missing from child welfare care, where they may go missing multiple times and be reported to us multiple times.
Do you know what percentage of children fit that category?
I don't have the exact number of the repeat missing incidents that are reported to us, but that's certainly something we could follow up on.
And then when NCMEC gets evidence, how is it stored? Who has access to it? How are these individuals protected, the victims?
Absolutely. So an important question. And I think what's important too is to maybe talk a little bit about how NCMEC becomes involved in these cases. So when NCMEC receives a report from a parent, legal guardian, law enforcement, or a member of child welfare who is reaching out to report a child missing, of course, they've first reported that to law enforcement and then reach out to NCMEC voluntarily to make a secondary report. At that point, we then become involved with intaking that case and then leveraging a suite of resources to provide support.
So let's talk in theory, the hypothetical. Let's say somebody found a tape, recording of a child or someone who looked over 12 but under 18, reported it to state law enforcement authorities. Would they then go to NCMEC and NCMEC then get involved, for example? Or if it's already been reported to state authorities, does NCMEC not get involved? Does that make sense?
Sure. So at that point, if law enforcement were to reach out to NCMEC and request certain assistance regarding their investigation into that, we would be available to provide.
What kind of tools does NCMEC have in investigations to use to sort of figure some of this stuff out?
So in terms of, so I think you're talking a little bit more on the child sexual abuse material side. So I can speak to that briefly, and then in terms of other colleagues of mine that have a little bit more.
But they could be trafficked. I mean,
certainly.
if you find videos of children and sexual abuse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we do see a connection between child sexual abuse material and child sex trafficking. So depending on if that child is known or unknown, so there are certain resources, certainly Traffic Jam and Spotlight, if we are trying to identify if that child may be involved in trafficking and may be featured in an online escort ad, we're going to leverage some tools that have resources for making that connection.
Does NCMEC do like forensic interviews with some of these children, or is that a process of law enforcement? Or
That is process solely of law enforcement and forensic interviewers that are connected outside of that system.
And then in terms of technology and trying to find the children who are victims of human trafficking, what has been the best case scenario? What have you seen that's been very much working to the betterment of these victims with the advances of technology we see today?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think there are 3 tools that I mentioned, Spotlight, Traffic Jam, and Traffic Cam, that we use every single day in making connections between active missing children that are actively being exploited. And so, with these being with small companies, it's so important that there's continued resources to support the innovation, the expansion, the growth, and then the ability to keep up with the trends in the field to ensure that we can continue to evolve with the offenders.
And then someone said earlier, technology should not be used on survivors. Was that Ms. Lundstrom or was that Ms. Snow? Who said that? That was you? That really struck a chord with me. Can you just expand on that a little bit, how technology should not be used on survivors? Do you mean in terms of like when they come forward, and what do you mean? Can you expand on that for me?
So in terms of data collection, there comes a point at which it is extractive, the amount of information that is collected from survivors for the sole purpose of just having information, as opposed to making sure that an organization or an entity has the information necessary to meet the survivor's needs. And then when it comes to identifying trafficking, a very fine line, as Roy spoke about, where we tip into surveillance, and survivors are already experiencing surveillance by our traffickers.
And what do you think about the use of, in like depositions of survivor or a victim being filmed to get their responses when there's like an investigation or a prosecution or a civil suit? How traumatizing is that for victims?
I can't speak to all victims, but what I can share is, especially in cases where child sex abuse materials or pornography has been involved in their exploitation, things like recording can bring up a trauma response and feel re-exploitative. And so that is why it is so important to have a trauma-informed approach, to be transparent with that survivor, to provide multiple options for recording, explain where it's going to be stored, who's going to access it, and when it will be destroyed.
Just one last question, if you don't mind. I'll give you 30 seconds more. How many states do trauma-informed investigations, you think?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. And I yield back in 38 extra seconds to my colleague, Ms. Brown.